Hey, today on FlyWire, we're going to do part 2 of the Mig23 Ejection interview with Mark Ruff. So stick with me on FlyWire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire, we're going to run part 2 of the interview I did with Mark Ruff about his ejection from the Mig23 at the Detroit Air Show. This is just the rest of our conversation. We had about 20 more minutes of conversation and stories, and I chopped it off to make the first part 1 not as long. So here you go. Without further ado, here's part 2. Just a little quick story about your situation. So I ended up being a SARCAT for an ejection in the Strike Eagle, and I had it was a student sortie from out of Seymour Johnson, going to low-level nav to Air Force Air, and then drop some bombs in Air Force Air, and then come back and land. And I had my range time, everything's lined up. I'm on my range time, I'm on time, and one of my guys from the squadron is ahead of me, overstaying his range time into mine. Made me pretty pissed off. I'm still mad about it, because all that does is cost me time and fuel and maybe even mission effectiveness. So I jump on a Navy Dare. We're going to Air Force Dare. We go to Navy Dare, which it's available, and you can drop bombs on it, but it's not a good range. Yeah. So I'm dropping bombs on it, and then the other flight leaves, and the ranger calls me and says, "Hey, that other flight in front of you is leaving. Do you still want your time?" I said, "Absolutely." So we jump over onto Air Force Dare, and I'm running down final. As I remember, I was going to do a loft, where you're driving in at low altitude at a certain speed, and then you loft up, and then you pickle a bomb here, and it arcs to the target. It's really cool. And there's a certain point when you loft and you turn, and you can look outside. You know where to look. You see the bomb arcing. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm in the middle of that, and the ranger says, "Hey, that flight that just left, one of the airplanes ejected. The airplane went down into the intercoastal waterway." Oh, wow. And so I go, "Holy rip, knock it off, knock it off, knock it off." And I sent my student, I said, "You go home, climb to X altitude and get out of here and go one to a full stop and land." Mm-hmm. And so apparently the other guy's student was doing the same thing. And then I went looking for the airplane. It wasn't hard to find, because it's in water and there's a lot of bubbles and disturbed, mud and everything. So it was pretty obvious where the airplane was. So I was thinking about his vector, where he was, and where the wind was. And I said, okay, well, the guy's ejected, so they're probably over here. And there's a big field, but then there's trees, water, trees, and a big field. And I found the pilot in the big field.
Okay.
And
you could see the chute. Was it?
I could see the chute. It's orange and white,
okay.
And because if for combat you can use different ones,
sure.
But basically use orange because it's a high vis and you want people
Correct.
to see it.
Yeah, and I learned in survival training with the Air Force that orange is the color that occurs least naturally. So out in nature, how often do you see the color orange? It's pretty rare. So that color stands out to us.
Stands out, yeah. Lime green actually is the best for our vision.
Oh, really?
It's weird. Yeah, it's a small one.
Probably why some of the sea dyes, when you
are that color.
Lime green,
yeah,
makes it stand out.
So I call the Coast Guard, Elizabeth City, get a helicopter come in to pick him up, and I start looking for the backseater, because the backseater comes out first. In that airplane, the whole canopy departs, and once you get that huge that clamshell canopy into the air, it's gone, and the backseat leaves in the front seat. The sequence is actually quicker than the F4, because one seat goes left and one seat goes right.
Oh, wow, okay.
And the seat, the ACS-2 is also gyro stabilized.
Nice.
It's really interesting. What it has is there's a serrated rod that is welded to the floor, and it's in this little gear, so when the seat comes up from the floor, it starts spinning this gyro in the seat. So it's up to like 30,000 RPM by the time the seat leaves.
Wow.
And it's what it does is it controls a rocket. So it's got that seat has a separate rocket, and then that stabilizing rocket.
Like a rocket on a gimbal?
It's on a gimbal, and what happens is when it's tumbling, that gyro tries to stabilize, tries to align with that. When it does that, it pulls a little pulley that changes where the rocket nozzle is, and you damp out. I mean, you might be upside down. If you're upside down, it won't turn you right side up, but it'll damp out those strange.
Yeah, because we were at an angle.
Yeah, it'll damp that out, and any oscillations, et cetera, because you want to have a clean man-seat separation.
Sure.
And stuff. So I knew that where he was, based where he was, I knew where, I should look for the backseater, and I couldn't find it. Couldn't find him. All trees, and the trees in that area are 80 to 100 feet. Big pines, really tall, and very much actually like Vietnam karst area. And we had developed in the Air Force these. You don't fly with them all the time, but if you fly with that, in those kind of areas with trees, it's a repelling system, with a little flat cord. Yeah, well, it's actually in the back, in your seat back, right here, and your harness, and you hook it up to a tree branch or something like that, or your harness, and then let yourself down. So it's a brake and all that, and you let yourself down. So I knew he had the ability, if he got caught in a tree, he could let himself down. And eventually, I got low, and I could see that there's this one tree sticking up in this whole area. And when I went to look at that tree, it had an orange parachute stuck on top of it.
Yeah, it's awesome. You could see it, and got it. Get that location, the lat long to people, and
no, none of that.
He was able to get down.
Yeah. I didn't do that stuff. I'm trying to get him where I need to get him picked up. So I'm calling him on the radio. No call, no contact. And finally, he did that PLD, used that personal lowering device, got down to the ground, 100 feet, and then he got on the radio, because I'm overhead, tight circle. He calls me on the radio, and I said, okay, get your compass out. Congrats, it's great to hear your voice.
Yep.
Now get your compass out and take a bearing. And it's really dark in those trees, so I want you to follow this compass bearing, and it's going to take you to an open field. And he did that. So and the reason why I think this is important, not because I did the SARCAP, but because what saved these two people, this crew, was the backseater. Because unfortunately, they had an engine fire, leaving the range. The pilot had flown an airplane. The F-4 and the T-38 actually had firelights on either side of the cockpit. The F-15 had the same place, just one on the left, one on the right. So he had flown the T-38, and they were separated. So he shut down the engine that matched the firelight.
So it was the right light on the left side, and he equates it with the left engine, and so shut down the good engine.
He shut down the good engine.
The right, okay.
The fire's still going, the light's still on, and he goes, holy shit, I got the bad, I got the good engine. He shuts down the bad engine. There is no time for relight. And this apparently, as their memory serves, was somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 feet.
Ooh.
There's no time for a relight.
Yeah.
No. So he was concentrating on that, and then the backseater punched him out.
Yeah.
They lived because of that. And that's why you have crew coordination. You talk about how you're going to do things like that, and you survive, because the front seater can get channelized attention. He's task saturated. He's trying to focus on saving the airplane, and I think that's probably what happened in this case. Is he was focused on trying to save the airplane, but he's actually below that decision.
Without a doubt, and he's an excellent aviator, and
this isn't necessarily hit on him, but he's damn lucky that you were in the airplane, that it was a two-seat airplane, and somebody was there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand.
So
hopefully they'll be able to figure out what caused the engine to go to no thrust, whether it was the nozzle issue, whether it was the fuel controller issue that Jim Brown, that JB had, whether it was something else. Hopefully we'll find out. Because we want to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it was. It burned, so the engine core should tell us a lot. The nozzles and their position should be instructive. In other words, we can tell, hey, it was an idle, and it wasn't a nozzle problem. But as far as the fuel controller goes, it really depends on what material it was made out of and where it was in the fire.
Sure, it's a very complex. I've never seen so many valves and levers and connecting rods and all just it's an incredible piece of equipment, but it's incredibly complex. So hopefully it survived enough to start giving us some clues.
So yeah.
But again, no one being hurt on the ground is a miracle.
Huge
And
plus.
That's what we take away from it.
So my other lesson learned, I think, is important here is if it wasn't for ejection seats, you guys wouldn't be here.
That is correct. As we descended out of the bottom part of the envelope, we had all of our chips were on the table. We had nothing left. So the airplane was going to be crashing either with me in it, or hopefully without me in it. And there's just it's a helpless feeling.
Yeah. So where I'm going with this is that the ejection seat gives you options, and there's a lot of little jets out there, civilian jets, that they've removed the ejection seats. And for one thing, the airplane you were flying, the engine provides the hydraulic power to operate the flight controls. It does have a backup system to give you emergency boost, but apparently when I was reading the Dash 1, it's a little problematic. It doesn't always work right. And if it doesn't work right, you have no control. You are in a brake that you cannot affect your flight path with. So there's that. So that airplane needs operating ejection seats.
It does.
Yeah. Airplanes like the L-39, the S-211 that we fly, those airplanes have mechanical flight controls, so you don't need the engine to run them. But most of them, it seems, don't have ejection seats. The ones that do, and this is why I'm saying this, is because to successfully use them, as you mentioned, people have ejection seats and they're using them out of the envelope. You have to have training. And you have to have recurrent training. In the Air Force,
Absolutely.
You go through the seat training and then you do it every year.
Right, I was about to say, we both had to go through recurrent and that process of being trained on that seat and the muscle memory that's required. If you're injured, if you're upside down, spinning, you need to be able to get to the green apple, all the different things that are required. If you're going to operate aircraft like this, you have to take it seriously. And the reason that civilian ejection seats have such an iffy record is because of people trying to operate the seat outside of its parameters at the last minute. And that's something that, since the accident has been brought to my attention, is they call it owner bias. I had never heard that before. So I think it probably applies to most people talking about homes and cars and selling and things like that. That my home is worth this amount or whatever. Well, you're biased because it's yours, And what is required to make that decision when this is your pride and joy, this is your baby, you spent so much time making it perfect in the way you want it, and you're proud of it, and accepting the reality in front of you, which is if you wait a few seconds longer, you will die. Mm-hmm. You will die in this thing that can be replaced when you cannot be replaced. And so that's something that in the civilian world, I look forward to getting out to the community that operates aircraft that have these. And it's important that they are operated and are operated safely, and that we learn from accidents like this.
Absolutely.
But also, there are a lot of people that I've seen operate these aircraft, and they don't take the dress to egress seriously. They don't take training another occupant in the aircraft seriously. There's so much that we can do to move this farther, to get that record back up, where more data points like me being able to be here with you today is only possible because of the training, the designers, the maintainers, all those other people, because my eggs were all in one basket. We catch them. We took it as far as we could go, and we were getting ready to take it beyond that.
So when you go to Vegas, I don't think you should go to the casinos.
No,
you used your bag. You used your luck bag here.
I used all my luck.
So what you said just reminded me. So that Wizzo, the student Wizzo I was telling you about, I'd actually given them. I had a job for a while as a wing life support officer.
Okay.
And so I did this seat training thing a lot.
You're very familiar with it.
Yeah, very familiar with it. Do it a lot. And I had given him and his class, this training as a recurrent thing. Generally, the B course takes about 6 months-ish, and you do it initially, and then you do it recurrent somewhere in the service tech phase. Mm-hmm. So I'd given him a recurrent, as I remember, just not maybe a week or 10 days ahead before this thing happened. And one of the things I used to tell guys about that decision to eject, because it's not only people who own the airplane. Remember I told you about that friend of mine in the F4 who departed the airplane below 10 and then used the chute to recover it. And he got in trouble because he didn't make that decision to eject.
He didn't follow the procedure.
He didn't follow the procedure. And what I would tell people when I run classes is that, you know, you're not saving the airplane. Who are you saving the airplane for? You know, you're not saving the airplane, you know, and if you make that decision to eject and they determine that it's your fault, you screwed up, you shouldn't have ejected. I can't actually remember a case where that happened, but it probably has happened. But if they do that and they gut on you and they take your license away, you're alive. You can flip burgers at McDonald's, and you're still alive, and you can go on with your life.
And that's that snap decision. That is understanding it to the point where you realize we are at flaps full. We've got an engine that is producing no thrust. We are 300 feet above the ground, and we are stalling. There are no other cards to play. There is no, oh, let me try this other thing. Oh, I didn't think about this procedure.
Too late.
You have to accept that.
Yeah, and as we saw from the Mig23-1, that altitude was 1,700, maybe 2,000 feet higher than where you were. So, yeah, you were below that point. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. That was my interview with Mark Ruff. Some really good lessons learned and some interesting experience or some background on the ejection decision and some of the issues faced by people that are flying high performance jet airplanes, not airliners, not biz jets, but actual fighter jets. There's a lot of issues there that aren't in your normal course of events, not normal flying day. So that's all this video was. It wasn't about all the other different myriad of topics and stuff that could be generated and have been by some of the comments on part 1. Just a video about the ejection decision and Mark's experience. So hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe. It looks like like this here. And thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time on FlyWire.